안녕하세요. 삼성자산운용 김재윤입니다. 오늘은 저희가 비트코인을 주제로 얘기를 해보려고 하는데요. 게스트로는 삼성자산운용의 자회사, 삼성자산운용 홍콩법인의 ETF 마케팅 담당자인 스테픈 청을 모셔봤습니다. 스테픈 안녕하세요. 오늘 스튜디오를 온라인으로 방문해 주셔서 너무 감사드립니다. 스테픈 씨는 비트코인을 다년간 공부하셨다고 들었는데요. 영상을 시청하시는 분들께 한번 인사와 본인 소개 한번 부탁드리겠습니다.
My name is Stephen Chung. I work at Samsung Asset Management in Hong Kong. Well, regarding blockchain and cryptocurrencies, I've been witnessing this sector since later parts of 2016 and been paying very close attention to Bitcoin throughout these years. I have some experience within this sector and I'd love to share more with you.
네, 스테픈 씨 시험이 너무 멋있으신데요. 한국에서는 찾아보기 힘든 스타일인데 굉장히 잘 어울리시는 것 같습니다.
It's only because I don't have hair. That's the only reason why I have to grow a beard. I'm glad. Maybe they'll remember me for better or for worse, right?
네, 벌써부터 오늘의 대화가 너무 기대되는데요. 그럼 바로 저희의 오늘 주제인 비트코인으로 넘어가 보겠습니다. 비트코인 가격은 올해 약 55% 상승하며 높은 성장률을 보였는데요. 어떻게 비트코인이 이러한 성과를 거둘 수 있었는지 한번 의견을 부탁드립니다.
Bitcoin's price on a year-to-date basis at its high was actually up an astounding 80%. And of course, this is a recovery from the 60,000 or so highs from last year. And I think the recovery for this year is mainly based on a couple of things. I think investors have gotten a lot more sophisticated and have a better fundamental knowledge of Bitcoin throughout the ordeals that has happened with certain stable coins last year, and of course with certain exchanges that have actually gone bankrupt now, and those have caused lots of pain for investors. But I think this year the recovery is the fact that wounds are being healed and investors have gotten a lot smarter on how to manage their assets. Nonetheless, fundamentally, nothing has actually changed in Bitcoin. So for Bitcoin, it still operates on every single 10 minutes. There's a new block that will be rewarded. Its monetary policy remains exactly the same from the day that it was designed, where there is a halving event every single 4 years. 21 million is the limit. No matter what happens within the industry or the global financial system, whether it's another FTX or another stablecoin that goes bust, that will not change the fundamentals, which is that supply is limited. And as people adopt Bitcoin, it is where the value will be. So the returns this year is mainly from a recovery and investors being smarter than they were last year, I think.
비트코인의 구조적인 성장세에 대해서 말씀을 주셨는데요. 이 부분을 한번 다시 짚고 넘어가고 싶습니다. 비트코인이 2009년 1월 처음 도입되었는데요. 그 이후로 지금까지 비트코인의 가치와 성과에 대해 조금 더 얘기를 해주실 수 있으실까요?
Right, so Bitcoin is actually one of the best performing asset classes in all of financial assets for the past 14 years. Out of these 14 years, and we can take a look at the charts later, there were only 3 years that were down, last year being one of those years. So only 3 times in its history where it had a negative year. And if we take a look at this, frankly speaking, against major indices within our area, whether you compare that to the Hang Seng Index or the US, even further away US S&P 500 or NASDAQ, or even the Korean Kospi, Bitcoin price has fundamentally outperformed all of these on a longer term horizon. On a specific year, they might not have outperformed, but if you take a look at the historical pricing, it's really fundamentally there. So as long as when you take a look at the chart, don't take a look, not only take a look at a 1-year chart, but take a look at a 3-year, 5-year chart, you will see the difference versus major equity benchmarks. So this is something that proves that Bitcoin does hold and retain its investment value. I think one thing that gravitates people to Bitcoin price is the fact that it's sort of like a digital gold. And how we look at that is, if you take a look at the amount of Bitcoin that was required to purchase something like, if we take a look at a chart that we have prepared, the newest cell phone, right? How much it cost, say, in 2011. How many Bitcoins it would have cost to purchase one versus how many Bitcoins it would cost now to purchase the same new flagship model, you can see that the number of Bitcoins required is actually decreasing, which basically translates to Bitcoin actually appreciating in value versus fiat currency. And if we take a look at some of the longer term trends, if we take a look at what is called Bitcoin Pizza Day, right? So way back, one of the first ever transactions, real life transactions that was ever recorded, was someone actually used a whole bunch of Bitcoins to buy 2 pizzas. And that amount, in current day terms, the amount of Bitcoins is roughly around 200 something million US dollars. Okay, so we can see that if you hold Bitcoin, right, it does have an appreciation in value over the years, no matter if you're buying the newest flagship cell phone or if you're just taking a look at it versus a fiat currency like the US dollar, for example. So the Bitcoin Pizza Day is a friendly reminder to everyone that, on May 22nd, someone did used to spend a lot of Bitcoins to buy 2 pizzas, which they most likely regret. So these are things that are proving the value of Bitcoin over time.
네, 그 당시 지불했던 피자가 아마 세상에서 가장 비싼 피자가 아닐까 싶네요.
Yeah, definitely.
비트코인이 단 3번 마이너스 성장률을 기록을 했다고 말씀을 주셨는데요. 하지만 저는 개인적으로 2022년 약세장이 특히나 기억에 남는 것 같습니다. 아마 5월에 있었던 루나 코인 폭락, 그리고 11월에 있었던 FTX 거래소의 파산 때문인 것 같은데요. 그 두 이벤트에 대해서 혹시 조금 더 설명을 해주실 수 있을까요?
Sure. So the significance of both events are fundamentally important to a cryptocurrency investor. Number one, let's talk about the exchanges. So what happened at FTX is a couple of things, but majorly is the commingle funds, okay, of client assets and the platform's assets, which is obviously a big no-no. So it's not allowed by many regulators, and it is clearly, illegal, so to speak, and they are having to go through these legal troubles now. The other point that you mentioned is actually the stable coin, the Luna stable coin. And what happened over there was it was basically an algorithmic stable coin which was not able to maintain its peg, and a lot of people use these stable coins for leverage and of course to also buy Bitcoin on leverage, therefore causing the fact that when margin is called, Bitcoin prices will have to drop, because when you get called on margin, anything that has value will have to be sold to meet these margin obligations. So that in itself was a negative sentiment through the entire industry, and also was responsible for the collapse of FTX, so to speak. So I believe that after the negative performance year of 2022, this should be the era where investors actually learn a lot more about self-custody and what type of financial products that they can use to gain exposure without having to face these type of risks. So going forward, I think the chances of these things happening will certainly decrease, and it's better for the overall environment, and also feeds into the upcycle that we've had this year, plus 50% gains.
네, 저희가 이벤트를 얘기를 하다 보니까 기억이 나는데 아마 가장 예측 가능한 이벤트는 할빙 이벤트인 것 같습니다. 실제로 비트코인 업계에서 할빙 이벤트는 굉장히 중요한 이벤트로 인식이 되는데요. 할빙 이벤트에 대해서 설명을 해주실 수 있을까요?
The halving event is one of the most major events for Bitcoin. It happens once every single 4 years, or 210,000 blocks. This is an important event because the design or the protocol of Bitcoin since day one is that every single halving, every single 10-minute block reward that the miners get is decreased by half. So right now, it's 6.25, it's going to be 3.125 after April of 2024, which means that the available for sale amount of Bitcoins is actually decreasing all the way up until the limit of 21 million. So this decrease in supply is actually one of the factors that plays into Bitcoin pricing, right? So if demand remains stable or increases, naturally speaking, you'll have to raise prices in order for someone to want to sell it to you. Inversely, if we think about this event, it also means that less capital is required to maintain Bitcoin at a certain price. Because new supply has decreased by half, you need actually half the amount of capital to maintain it at a certain price. So these are very interesting events. And another thing that probably investors don't really think about is the fact that this is actually a monetary policy. So within our financial system, monetary policy largely dictates what investors will do, what we think about interest rates, right? So right now we have lots of central banks that will tell us when they have a meeting, but they will not tell us until they actually decide if they're going to add interest rates or are they going to cut interest rates. It's a guess by the market, so to speak. But for Bitcoin, there is no guessing, right? There is no need to guess. Every single 4 years, it will be cut by half, the supply, and there is no negotiation. That cannot be changed by this protocol, which means that it actually gives investors a very clear monetary policy to follow. So this is something that investors should actually look hardly and deeply into.
하빙을 언급해 주시니 가장 먼저 기억에 나는 거는 비트코인 채굴인데요. 할빙이 비트코인 채굴에 어떤 영향이 있을까요? 그리고 채굴 기업들의 눈여겨볼 만한 특징들이 혹시 따로 있을까요?
A lot of investors will automatically or tend or be inclined to think that these Bitcoin miners, they must be getting most of their revenue, which is from the block reward. So if the block reward is decreased by half, will it not mean that Bitcoin miners are actually going to be making less money? So first thing to remember is there's already been 2 halvings, okay? And Bitcoin miners still exist. Okay, so this must mean that they are still making money. If we take a look at the price of Bitcoin since the last 2 halvings, you can see that it's actually gone up quite a bit. Okay, but on the second side, do remember that Bitcoin miners, they not only have the block reward, but they also make transaction fees. So we can actually see that from this year, the transaction fees actually outnumbered in remuneration than the actual block reward, which means that miners has proven, or the mining capability has proven that even with decreasing block reward, miners can still be profitable with transaction fees. Okay, so this is very important. And secondly, just take a look at what has happened recently. So one of the OTC products is actually most likely to get turned into an ETF. This has caused the miners to go up double-digit percentages, and this actually shows you that the market still feels that miners are going to be profitable. Not to mention they have vastly outperformed Bitcoin price. Some miners are up 300% on a year-to-date basis. So it's definitely a sector to look into.
네, 지금까지 저희는 비트코인의 밸류와 펀더멘털에 대해서 얘기를 나눠봤는데요. 이제 조금 주제를 변경을 해봐서 비트코인의 활용 방식에 대해서 얘기를 해보자 합니다. 출시된 지 14년이 된 지금 비트코인의 활용 방식이 어떻게 변해오고 그리고 발전해 왔는지 얘기해 주실 수 있을까요?
Starting from last year, we are seeing basically state level adoption. You can see different regulatory bodies in different regions, especially over here in Asia, actually regulating to allow for investments to safely invest into cryptocurrencies, more specifically Bitcoin. And exchanges are also getting, and brokerages are also getting their licenses. So these are very important developments. It's all positive to the adoption. Okay. Secondly, we are not only seeing regulatory adoption, we're seeing basically sovereign adoption. We have seen that certain economies and certain geographical areas actually launch state level mining. Okay, so one example is a really recent news is Oman has actually started mining Bitcoin themselves as a capital investment for the entire sovereign nation. So this type of adoption will thus facilitate more miners, and it will facilitate more people to use it. And of course, we can see that hash rate, and which is basically amount of miners that are participating in the network going into all-time highs. These are all very positive signs of adoption. And more and more people have a wallet now, a digital wallet. More and more people are looking deeply into the fact that this is something that can save them from inflation. And of course, lastly, you can most likely find that a business around you will start accepting Bitcoin in one form or another, whether it be on layer 1 or on layer 2 on the Lightning Network. So these are all things that are improving in adoption.
네, 이제 바로 마지막 질문인데요. 비트코인의 제도화 이제 다가오고 있을까요?
I think the answer is an astounding yes. So, in certain geographical areas, for example, in Europe, they have already started to launch ETFs that are targeting Bitcoin. There are many institutional asset managers that want to launch in North America, specifically in the United States. And of course, over here in Asia, there are already ETFs that exist that are ready for people to invest in. So the institutional adoption is a chicken and egg question. Do you launch the product first and wait for people to buy? Or is it actually the end investors that are waiting, that want to buy and are asking the institutional asset managers to launch certain products for them so that they can get exposure? But all these things combined with what we've just talked about shows that adoption is clearly gaining. Institutional adoption is probably just around the corner.
오늘은 비트코인을 주제로 비트코인의 펀더멘털, 할빙, 그리고 제도화까지 다양한 주제를 얘기를 해보았는데요. 스테판 씨, 오늘 비트코인을 주제로 그리고 가상화폐를 주제로 여러 가지 지식을 나눠주시고 오늘 스튜디오에 참석해 주셔서 다시 한번 너무 감사드립니다.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a very interesting sector, and I think it's very new to lots of people. And I'd love to get a chance to speak more with you, Jerry, on this.
네, 아쉽지만 이렇게 스테픈과의 인터뷰가 이렇게 끝이 났습니다. 오늘은 비트코인을 주제로 비트코인의 펀더멘털, 할빙, 그리고 제도화에 대해서 얘기를 해보았는데요. 다음에 또 좋은 영상으로 뵙겠습니다. 감사합니다.